Stephen Koepfer joining us right now from the NY MMA Now discussion, where they're trying to bring MMA to a legal basis in New York State. Welcome to the show, Steve. How are you?
Hey, thanks, guys, for having me on, man.
Sure. We had Duff Holmes on last hour, and he had great things to say about you, by the way.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yep, and he, of course, thinks, as many of you do, that we're real close to finally getting professional MMA fighting approved in New York State. About time, right?
Yeah, maybe. Well, why so close this time, you think?
Well, every year we feel like we're close, but this year we've got, I think, more factors going in our favor than ever before. Part of which is, the fact that Sheldon Silver is out of the Assembly Speaker seat. So
Great point. Great point.
Yeah.
Who has put the kibosh on this almost each and every time that has come to the floor.
Yeah, the Senate has never been a problem, especially with Senator Griffo leading the charge up there, which is he's in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, correct.
And it's been the Assembly that's been the problem, and with Silver out and Speaker Heastie in, we think, and that, and combined with Governor Cuomo's very vocal support this year, we think we're in pretty great shape.
Now, where are you located, Stephen?
I live in Astoria, Queens.
Okay, and are you a longtime trainer? Are you a fighter yourself?
Yeah, actually, ironically, my first fight was in 1997, the year that it was banned here.
Wow. Wow.
And was it always an MMA background for you, or how did you start getting into the sport?
Well, I've been in martial arts my whole life. I'm 47 years old. My mom put me in karate when I was 7 years old, and the rest is kind of history. And I've owned a gym since 2003, my own gym.
And our own intern, Courtney, that's kind of the same. She's been doing this for 8 or 9 years, but same kind of idea. She was in type of martial arts and then went forward with getting more involved with the mixed martial arts end of it as well, and doing it for 8 or 9 years, as she has mentioned. So, and she is a female, something that we've been talking about this morning in regards to this sport, and we brought it up with Duff. Ronda Rousey making, big headlines for the sport as a female. Do you see that more female athletes getting involved in the MMA sport?
Yeah, I think female involvement is very much on the rise. It's also very important for our legislators to see up in Albany. But, even in my gym, we've got several females. Ironically, some who have come from boxing, Golden Glove boxers and things like that. So, females in combat sports is not a new thing. And it's about time that it really started to grow in mixed martial arts as well.
So detractors keep beating the drum of, it's a dangerous sport. So ironic with what's going on in the NFL and the head injuries we've seen over the course of the last decades in the NFL. The one thing that Duff brought up on the phone with us earlier this morning I thought was interesting. He thinks boxing is far more dangerous than MMA because of the repeated blows that a boxer absorbs simply because the gloves are softer. He thinks it's a lot safer with a knockout punch than it is with repetitive blows.
Sure, it's 100% true. And in fact, over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 years, there have been several peer-reviewed studies that have come out from different concussion study organizations that show that boxing is way more detrimental for head injury than mixed martial arts. That's not to say that it doesn't exist in mixed martial arts, because it does, of course, but not anything compared to, say, boxing or football. And one of the great things is that part of the legislation, and also which was basically the text that Governor Cuomo used to include it in the budget, assuming that we do get MMA in New York, the new legislation includes a long-term retrospective study of brain injury for any fighter that fights in New York, and a healthcare fund to take care of them as well.
Steve, what are the percentages of submissions that end an MMA match versus knockouts? Do you have any stats on that?
The stats do exist. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's pretty even. I couldn't tell you exactly. I would be able to look it up and maybe forward the information to you guys, but I know it's pretty pretty even, probably about 50-50 or thereabouts, you know?
And with that, I think Dave was kind of trying to allude to the fact of what you just mentioned as far as the safety aspect of it. How many punches are these guys taking in boxing to the head compared to maybe some of the punches taken to the head in MMA fighting? And Duff brought this up this morning as well, as far as, you know, a lot of times the grappling end might be on the ground a little bit more, and then there's more body surface, I guess. In boxing, you're hitting from the waist up, so there's more opportunity to hit other parts of the body instead of the repetitive striking of the head.
Well, sure. Unlike boxing, in MMA, if you are a fighter and you feel like you're taking more damage than you want to the head, you actually have the option, right, to grapple, to wrestle, to take it down to the ground. And unlike boxing, there's no standing counts, right? So once, you know, you'll find that quote unquote TKO finishes in MMA are very fast because you don't get your 10 count or your 8 count and get stood up and go back out there to fight again. Once the referee stops it, it's done, you know. So it's ended much quicker in MMA than it is in boxing too. And there's less rounds to fight.
Interesting. I'm actually trying to surf and look for some of these stats as we're talking about. I'll have them in just a moment. We're talking with Stephen Koepfer, who's a coach down from Astoria, Queens, and also a member of NY MMA Now. Explain a little bit about your organization, Steve.
Sure. We started it at the end of 2009, and it's basically a coalition of coaches and fighters and fans and supporters of mixed martial arts, and we've been, you know, trying to be in the picture and get the word out for the last 6 or 7 years. You know, it all started one year when we thought we were really, really close and we didn't get it, you know. So then we were like, well, this is ridiculous. There's no unified effort here in New York. There's no coalition. There's no grassroots organization trying to fight this stuff, you know, built up from locals. The UFC has been great in terms of their lobby efforts and their presence in New York, you know, but the UFC are not locals. So it was really important to get a coalition of locals involved in the scene as well.
And besides the point that you brought up earlier as far as Shelley Silver maybe being the roadblock for this in the assembly, you mentioned Carl Hasty, the new speaker, stepping forward, and he's been pretty, you know, vocal for the fact that I think he says, you know, it's about time. What is the next step? What do you think the hang-up is currently right now?
Well, I mean, last year the hang-up, and it's always been sort of the how do I say, scapegoat or the excuse that was used by Silver was that we have to have a certain amount of support in the assembly. And what really that comes down to is whether or not, in my opinion, Hasty is allowed to let the legislation come to a vote, or if it's in the case of approving the governor's budget, allowing the approval to go on, that he allows the vote to happen. What generally the norm is up there that nobody really wants to help each other, and it has to do with sort of the problems of doing business in Albany. The Republicans don't want to help the Democrats and vice versa. And so the assembly, which is democratically controlled, really wants to pass legislation using only their own votes. They don't want to have to depend on Republican votes to help get a piece of legislation passed. So that's that magic number, 76 votes that everybody talks about. And last year we had more than 76 Democratic votes, and the problem there was that, if you recall, the assembly session went overtime, and by the time it came time to vote for MMA, some of the assembly members were no longer in Albany because of personal reasons, XYZ, and then our number of votes had dropped down below 76, so Hasty didn't allow it to go to the floor for a vote, despite the fact that we had plenty of votes if you include the Republicans. So hopefully this year, I think the pressure with the governor's support and with the lawsuit going on and with the total number of support that we have in the assembly, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer that we'll get it.
Great. Talking to Stephen Koepfer from NY MMA Now. I was asking about those stats with regard to knockouts and submissions. I found something here. I'm not sure this is empirical, but it's from MMAfighting.com, and it says here, maybe you can agree or disagree, about 30% of fights go to a full decision where a judge would have to decide. About 40% are either knockouts or TKOs, and the rest are submissions.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, with the improvement of the level of fighting over the years, from when I started and the way it is now, you have seen an increase in decisions, right? Because in the early days there were no judges, so
right.
there were no decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But now you've got the sport being trained independently as a sport, as MMA, as opposed to like a particular stylist going against a different stylist, like a karate guy versus a boxer guy or something like that. So with any sport, as people learn and game the rules, you're going to have higher quality fights, and more of them will go to decisions. So that makes total sense to me.
More evenly matched fighters, and that's what's going to happen, exactly. Best of luck. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Have a great day.
Keep up the good fight.
Will do.